A struggling single father gives his last dollar to a woman sobbing outside a gas station. She vanishes before he can ask her name. Days later, someone knocks on his door with a deed to a house in her handwriting. Who was she? Why did she choose him? What happens next will leave you speechless. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The cold crept in like a slow tide, seeping through the thin walls of the apartment as dawn broke over the city. The radiator coughed once, then gave up entirely, leaving Eli to rub his hands together and breathe into his fingers. He glanced over at the small, tangled figure in the blanket cocoon on the couch. Maya, fast asleep. Her tiny socked foot peeked out from under the covers, the pink fabric threadbare at the heel. He crouched beside her, tucking the blanket tighter around her shoulders. 5 more minutes, he whispered, more to himself than to her. He knew what came next, the rush, the scramble, the usual heartbreak of trying to give her a normal day when everything about their life felt like it was collapsing in slow motion. The past due notice on the fridge caught his eye again. Red letters. Final warning. He had already asked for an extension last month. The landlord had smiled thinly, told him he understood, then slipped the notice under the door anyway. Eli had 1 check left to cash this week, just enough to either cover groceries or the electric bill, not both. He poured water into a pot to boil on the stovetop. No working coffee maker anymore. The last one gave up during a power surge. He watched the bubbles rise and fall as he counted the coins in the change jar. $2.16. Maya stirred. "Daddy?" He turned, smiling as if nothing in the world was wrong. "Morning, sweet pea. You want oatmeal?" She nodded, rubbing her eyes with her fists. "With the cinnamon?" They were out of cinnamon. He hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." He scooped the last of the plain oats into the pot, stirring with a cracked wooden spoon, heart heavy. She didn't complain, she never did, but he knew she noticed. The missing cinnamon, the cold mornings, the way his smiles didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. He sat across from her at the wobbly kitchen table as she ate, chatting about a class project, a poster about animals. She had picked wolves, said they stick together no matter what. That stuck with him. Wolves, packs, loyalty, survival. As she slurped the last spoonful, Eli reached for his work shirt hanging on the back of the door. He had 4 hours at the warehouse and then another shift driving for a courier app. The shirts were clean, but the fabric was beginning to fray at the collar. No matter, he could stretch things a little longer. He always did. But, deep down, he knew something had to give soon, because hope wasn't something he could afford much longer, not with empty pockets and another cold morning ahead. The engine stuttered as Eli pulled into the back lot behind the warehouse. He gave the dashboard a firm tap, an old habit that never fixed anything, but made him feel like he had control over something, at least for a second. He cut the ignition, grabbed his worn backpack from the passenger seat, and took a long look in the rearview mirror. His eyes were sunken, the bags beneath them a permanent shadow. No time to dwell. It was always go, go, go. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, like they were mocking him. His steel-toe boots hit the concrete floor with heavy thuds as he clocked in. He didn't bother greeting the others. No one did at this hour. They were all just ghosts in uniforms, hunched over pallets and packing tape, existing to move boxes no one would remember by morning. Eli's hands moved with practiced rhythm, cut, fold, tape, lift, over and over. His body ached, but his mind stayed locked on the calendar in his head. Maya's school pickup was at 2:45, then the drop-off at his sister's place, if she was home and sober. After that, his second shift doing deliveries until midnight. Maybe later, if the tips were decent. By the time his lunch break rolled around, he sat alone at a metal table in the corner of the break room. Everyone else pulled out sandwiches, microwave burritos, snacks. Eli pulled out a granola bar and stared at it for a second before setting it back in his bag. It was the last one, and Maya liked it with her juice after school. He drank water instead. He scrolled through his phone while he sipped, looking at the unpaid bills app like he was checking lottery numbers. Rent, power, car insurance. Every notification, a little red flag waving in his face, daring him to lose his grip. The clock beeped. Break was over. Hours passed in a blur of motion. By the time he clocked out, his shirt clung to his back with sweat and his feet throbbed like they'd been crushed. But there was no rest. He rushed to the car, shot across town to pick up Maya. Late again. Her little face lit up when she saw him, which made him feel even worse. He didn't have the luxury of rest. He barely had the luxury of guilt. Later that night, after he tucked Maya into bed and kissed her forehead, he sat in the kitchen with the lights off to save power. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. He couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten a full meal, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was Maya, and getting through one more day. The morning had already been running on thin ice. Eli had spilled coffee on his only clean shirt. Maya couldn't find her left shoe, and the heater had finally died with a wheeze in the middle of the night. Still, somehow, they'd made it to the school parking lot with seconds to spare. He kissed the top of Maya's head as she clutched her backpack and sprinted through the gates, her pigtails bouncing behind her. Eli exhaled. He checked the time. He'd have to floor it if he wanted to make it to the warehouse by 9 o'clock. His boss had already warned him last week, "One more late clock in, and that's it, Turner." He didn't even have time to stop for gas. The needle sat just above empty, flirting with disaster. He turned onto Main Street when his phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from an unknown number. No, wait. It was the school. He fumbled to read it at a red light. "Hi, Mr. Turner. Maya forgot her lunch today. She says she'll be okay, but we wanted to let you know." Eli froze. His hand tightened on the steering wheel. She'd forgotten her lunch? In the rush to find her missing shoe and scrape ice off the windshield with a credit card, it had slipped both their minds. And Maya? She'd just smiled through it, said nothing. She never wanted to be a burden. The light turned green. He pulled over instead. The warehouse could wait. Or not. He didn't care anymore. He yanked the gear into reverse, turned around, and drove back toward the apartment as fast as the rusted Corolla could carry him. Inside their cramped kitchen, he opened every cupboard. Nothing. A few slices of stale bread, a packet of mayo, a soft apple. He slapped together what could only generously be called a sandwich and wrapped it in the last piece of wax paper. No lunchbox, no baggies. He shoved it into a paper sack with Maya's name written in smudged ink on the front. He drove back across town, weaving through traffic, heart pounding in his chest. He was definitely going to be late, maybe fired. But none of that mattered when he saw Maya sitting alone at the corner of the lunchroom table, fiddling with a plastic fork while the other kids unwrapped store-bought meals. He walked into the office and handed the sack to the receptionist, who smiled at him gently. "She said you'd remember." He didn't respond, just nodded and turned to leave before anyone could see the tears burning in his eyes. The check hit Eli's account at 12:01 a.m. on Friday morning. He had stayed up waiting for it, not out of excitement but necessity. The landlord had already texted him 3 times that week. "Where's the payment?" No hello, no signature, just pressure. By 12:03, Eli was already transferring funds. Half the paycheck disappeared in one tap, to rent. Another chunk to keep the power from being shut off again. The phone bill was late. The gas tank was hovering just above fumes. Groceries. That would have to wait. He stared at the remaining balance like it was a sick joke. $1.04. He opened his wallet almost out of reflex, like it might offer something the screen hadn't. There it was. A single soft bent dollar. One George Washington staring up at him like he knew it wasn't enough. He leaned back against the creaky chair in the corner of the kitchen, pinching the bridge of his nose. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator, which he was now praying wouldn't die too. Inside it, a carton of eggs with 2 left, half a bottle of ketchup, and a near-empty jug of milk. That was breakfast, lunch, and dinner until he figured something out. In the next room, Maya's soft breathing was steady and rhythmic. He'd gotten lucky tonight. She hadn't asked for a bedtime snack. There wasn't one. She'd colored quietly at the kitchen table while he cooked scrambled eggs with the last of the cheese and told her it was a breakfast surprise. He looked at the dollar again. It wouldn't buy a full gallon of milk. It couldn't cover parking downtown. It was barely even useful for vending machines anymore. Still, he folded it carefully and tucked it back into his wallet like it was sacred. There was nothing left to cut, no luxuries to trim. He hadn't bought himself anything new in over a year. His boots were separating at the sole, and his jacket had a tear under the left sleeve that he always hid with a shrug. This wasn't living. It was balancing on a wire stretched thin across a canyon of almost. Almost enough. Almost late. Almost okay. But almost didn't matter. He would go to work tomorrow, smile at customers, say, "I'm good, thanks," when someone asked how he was doing, and then he'd come home and sit across from Maya again, pretending the world wasn't falling in around them. It was payday, and he was broke. The gas light blinked on just as Eli turned into the station. He sighed, steering the car toward the far pump where the card reader actually worked most of the time. The engine coughed as he shifted into park, like it knew how close it was to giving up. He reached into his wallet, thumbed past the expired insurance card, a faded photo of Maya, and the single crumpled dollar bill. $1. Not enough to buy gas, not enough to buy a snack, maybe a cup of coffee, if the machine didn't add tax. He slid the bill into the pocket of his jeans and stepped out of the car, more for habit than purpose. The cold slapped him in the face, the kind that bites through fabric and settles in your bones. He pulled his jacket tighter and walked toward the convenience store, hoping the warmth inside would help him think. Maybe there was some coin change buried in the console he hadn't counted. Maybe he could buy Maya a hot chocolate as a surprise. Maybe. He stopped. Near the vending machines, half hidden in the shadows cast by the flickering sign overhead, sat a woman, hunched, crying, her back against the brick wall like it was the only thing holding her up. Her coat was too thin for the cold, the zipper broken, barely holding together with a safety pin. One shoe was a sneaker, the other a dress flat. No socks. Her hands trembled as she wiped at her face with a torn napkin. People passed her, a man with a Bluetooth in his ear, a couple laughing, stepping into a warm SUV. No one stopped. No one even looked. Eli hesitated. He had nothing to give. $1. That's it. And he was on his last thread of strength himself. But something about her, about the way she was trying so hard to cry quietly, like she didn't want to inconvenience the air, hit him square in the chest. He walked over, slow, like approaching a wounded animal. "Ma'am?" he said softly. She looked up, startled. Her eyes were swollen, mascara smudged like bruises. She said nothing, just shook her head. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled dollar. "It's not much," he said, voice cracking with quiet shame. "But maybe it'll help a little. I hope, whatever you're going through, I hope it gets better." She stared at the bill in his hand like it was gold, and then something in her face broke. Not in pain, something else. Something like disbelief. He didn't wait for thanks. He just turned and walked into the store, heart pounding, wishing he had more. When he came back out, she was gone. Eli stood in front of the vending machines, the glow from the fluorescent lights overhead casting pale shadows across the pavement. He could still hear her soft crying echoing in the back of his mind, even though she'd gone silent now, her face turned toward the wall like she was trying to disappear into the bricks. He reached into his pocket, fingers brushing over that single worn dollar bill. His last. The one he'd meant to stretch, to save, to maybe use for a small snack to hold him over until tomorrow's shift. But that didn't matter anymore, not when someone looked like they were at the edge of something darker. He crouched a few feet from her, keeping his voice low. Hey, I don't want to bother you, but she didn't look at him. I know what it's like to have no one stop, to feel invisible. He held the dollar out, not pressing it into her hands, just offering. It's not much, but it's what I've got. Finally, she turned her head. Her eyes were red, lashes clumped from tears. There was no anger in her face, just hollow exhaustion, the kind Eli recognized too well. She looked at the bill, then back at him. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You don't even know me." Eli let out a breath, shaky. "Because I've been where you are." Maybe not exactly, but close enough to see it on someone else's face. His voice cracked at the edges. "And because whatever you're going through, you matter." She blinked, like the words hit harder than she expected, like no one had said them in a very, very long time. He placed the dollar gently on the ledge of the vending machine beside her, then stood. "Take care of yourself, all right?" he said. She didn't answer, just stared at the bill, hands clenched tight in her lap. Eli gave her one last look, then walked toward the store to grab a cup of water, free at least. When he came out again, she was gone, the dollar too, but somehow the air felt different, lighter, like something important had just shifted, and he couldn't explain why. The faucet in the gas station restroom sputtered like it was struggling to keep up with the demand. Eli splashed cold water on his face, cupping it in calloused hands, hoping it would do something, anything, to shake off the weight clinging to him. Stared at his reflection in the scratched mirror, tired eyes, jaw tight, lines that hadn't been there last year. He dried his face with the paper towels, the kind that felt more like sandpaper, and exhaled through his nose. One more breath, one more step, one more moment of just making it. As he pushed the door open, the crisp air hit him again, sharp and biting. He squinted against the overhead lights as he stepped out into the lot. She was gone. The corner by the vending machines was empty now. The wall where she'd been curled up just minutes before was bare. No trace of her, no napkin, no bag, no sign she'd ever been there at all. Eli turned slowly, eyes scanning the parking lot. No buses pulling away, no cabs idling at the curb. Just the whir of traffic beyond the gas station sign and the muted hum of a city that never had time to notice when someone disappeared. He stepped toward the vending machines, half expecting to find her huddled on the other side, maybe just moved to a new spot. Nothing. Only silence. For a moment, he stood completely still. A strange ache opened in his chest. He didn't even know her name, hadn't asked. He'd been so focused on doing something, anything, that he hadn't thought to ask who she was, where she was going, or if she even had anywhere to go. The dollar was gone too. It shouldn't have meant much. It was just one act, one moment. But it felt bigger now, like the end of a conversation that had never truly begun. Eli climbed back into his car, the seat cold and stiff beneath him. He sat there for a long time, hands on the wheel, engine off. The world outside moved on as if nothing had happened, but something had. He just didn't know what it was yet. The apartment was already cold when Eli and Maya got home, but he figured it was just the usual draft sneaking in through the windows. He flipped the light switch near the door. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. The hum of the fridge had stopped. The small digital clock on the microwave was blank. The apartment had gone still in a way that made Eli's stomach clench. He set Maya's backpack down gently, keeping his voice light. "Looks like we've got a blackout, kiddo." Maya glanced up, her eyes wide. "Is it because of the storm?" Eli forced a smile. "Yeah, probably just a glitch. Power companies get sleepy sometimes, too." He grabbed the flashlight from the junk drawer and flicked it on, its beam flickering across the cramped kitchen like a spotlight on reality. The last notice from the electric company was still folded up inside the junk drawer, buried beneath broken pens and twist ties. He hadn't opened it all the way, didn't need to. He knew what it said. "I'm hungry," Maya said quietly. He crouched beside her. "How about we do something fun tonight?" he asked. "We're going to go full survival mode." Her brow furrowed. What do you mean? A camping adventure. Right here in the living room. He grinned. No lights, no electronics, just us and the flashlight. We'll pretend we're in the woods. Maya giggled, the fear in her face fading a little. Can we make a fort? Absolutely, he said, and together they pulled the couch cushions to the center of the floor. He draped a blanket over 2 chairs and tucked it in on the sides. Maya scrambled underneath with her stuffed bunny, flashlight in hand. Eli opened the cupboard, a half box of crackers, a can of beans. He found a manual can opener and heated the beans over a small camping stove he'd kept from years ago, back when things weren't this bad. He served them in mismatched mugs, told her it was a ranger's stew. She ate without complaint, huddled in their makeshift tent, whispering stories to her bunny. Later, when she finally drifted off to sleep, Eli sat alone in the darkness, no lights, no heat, no idea how they'd make it through the rest of the month. But he hadn't let her feel it, not tonight. And that was enough. For now. The knock came just after sunset, soft but steady. Eli looked up from the pile of overdue notices spread across the kitchen table. His fingers hovered over a calculator that had been spitting out numbers he didn't want to see for the past hour. He hadn't been expecting anyone. He rarely did. He opened the door to find Mrs. Ramirez from 4B standing in the hallway, her cheeks red from the cold, a canvas grocery bag clutched to her chest. "Hi," she said, eyes kind but cautious. "I was heading back from the food bank and I thought, well, I grabbed a few extra things. I didn't know if you might need some." Eli blinked, momentarily stunned. "You what?" She held the bag out gently like she didn't want to embarrass him. Just a few staples, rice, cans of soup, a loaf of bread, nothing fancy. He looked at the bag like it might disappear if he touched it. For a second, pride clawed at the back of his throat. Then it dissolved, swallowed by exhaustion. He took the bag with both hands, the weight of it far heavier than it should have been. "Thank you," he said, voice low, thick. "I mean it." Mrs. Ramirez smiled softly. "I've been there, you know. It doesn't last forever." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm trying. I'm really trying." "I can tell," she said, and then turned to go without another word, her footsteps fading down the hallway. Eli closed the door slowly, heart pounding. He placed the bag on the counter and opened it one item at a time like he was unpacking treasure. Canned peaches, pasta, crackers, a box of cereal Maya loved but hadn't had in weeks, a small carton of shelf-stable milk. He stared at it all, letting out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. For the first time in what felt like months, the kitchen didn't feel completely empty. There was food on the counter. There was a tomorrow that didn't look quite as bleak. When Maya came out from her room, rubbing sleep from her eyes, he held up the cereal box with a smile. "Guess what we're having for breakfast?" She squealed, hugging him tight around the waist, and in that moment, something broke open inside Eli. A tiny crack of light in the dark, brought on by nothing more than unexpected kindness. The phone rang at 8:42 p.m., sharp and jarring in the stillness of the apartment. Eli nearly dropped the chipped mug he was rinsing in the sink. He wasn't expecting any calls. No one ever called this late unless something was wrong. He dried his hands on his jeans and grabbed the phone off the counter. Unknown number. He hesitated. His thumb hovered over the answer button, probably spam or collections. But something about the silence in the room, the timing, the stillness of Maya coloring quietly in the living room made him press accept. "Hello?" There was a pause, just long enough to spike his heart rate. "Hi," a woman's voice said, soft, calm, almost too calm. "I just have a quick question." Eli stiffened. "Sure. Do you live at 24 Maple Lane?" His chest tightened. Yeah," he said slowly. "I do. Who's this?" But the line had already gone dead. "Hello?" he said again, pulling the phone back to check the screen. The call had ended. No voicemail, no name. Just gone. He stood there, staring at the screen, his heart thumping loud in the stillness. For a moment, all he could hear was the soft scratch of Maya's crayon across paper and the faint hum of the fridge trying to come back to life after the latest outage. 1,000 thoughts ran through his head. Was it the landlord? A scam? CPS? His breath hitched at that one. He'd been so careful. No one had seen them without power. No one had seen Maya in her mismatched winter clothes or her hand-me-down boots. But that voice didn't sound official. It didn't sound cold or calculating. It had sounded curious, personal, familiar in a way he couldn't place. He tried calling the number back, straight to voicemail. No message, just a robotic tone and silence. He set the phone down and tried to shake it off, but something about it kept gnawing at the back of his mind. Someone knew where he lived, someone who didn't introduce themselves, and somehow it didn't feel like the beginning of trouble. It felt like the beginning of something else entirely. Eli almost missed it. He was coming back from the night shift, keys in one hand, a half-eaten granola bar in the other, boots dragging like anchors. The hallway of the apartment building was dim, one of the overhead lights flickering like it couldn't make up its mind. He was too tired to notice anything, until his foot kicked something light by the door, a white envelope, thick, taped just above the doorknob. He paused, frowning. No name, no return address, just his apartment number scribbled across the front, in looping, deliberate handwriting. He peeled it off the door slowly, the tape making a quiet, ripping sound that echoed in the silence. Maya was still asleep, tucked in under the old Afghan blanket, and the last thing he wanted to do was wake her. He stepped inside and locked the door behind him, then sat at the table, the envelope resting like a weight in his palm. His first thought was eviction, a final notice. Some bureaucratic dagger slipped in with no warning, but the envelope was heavy. Not with threats, with paper. He opened it, fingers trembling. Inside, a single sheet of folded paper sat on top of a stack of documents. He unfolded it. Eli. Sometimes the smallest kindness can ripple into something bigger. You didn't ask for anything, but maybe you deserve something anyway. A friend. His stomach dropped. Beneath the note were legal documents, real ones, not copies, not fakes, a deed. To a house. He stared at the page, lips parting slightly as his eyes scanned it over and over again. The address wasn't familiar, but the name on the line was. Eli Turner, clear as day. It was his name, his house. His heart began to pound, the weight of it pressing against his ribs. He turned the page. Notarized signatures, legal jargon he barely understood, but it was all there, legitimate, real. His hand shook as he set the papers down. This wasn't a joke, it wasn't some cruel prank or charity stunt. Whoever had done this knew him, had seen him, not just the man juggling shifts and bills, but the one who gave his last dollar away to a crying stranger. He looked toward Maya's room, her door cracked just enough to hear her soft breathing. For the first time in what felt like forever, something opened inside him. Not panic, not dread, hope. And he had no idea what to do with it. Eli didn't sleep that night. The envelope sat on the table like it was watching him, daring him to believe. He read the letter again, then the deed, then again, and again. Every time the same name stared back at him, Eli Turner. He kept expecting the paper to dissolve, to reveal a watermark that said, "Just kidding," or for someone to bang on the door and scream that it had all been a mistake. His hands trembled as he made coffee he couldn't afford, sitting in the flickering kitchen light, mind racing in circles. By morning he was pacing. He tried calling the number listed on the bottom of the paperwork. No answer. He left a message, voice unsteady. Then he called the county clerk's office. The woman on the other end sounded like she'd been doing the job for 40 years. Blunt, efficient, the kind of tone that made you straighten your posture, even on the phone. "Yes, sir. What's the property address?" He gave it to her. It came out slowly, like he didn't trust the words coming out of his own mouth. She put him on hold. He stared at the silent phone screen, heart thudding against his ribs. This was it. She'd come back and say, sorry, that's not in your name. Or worse, that it was under investigation. Or tied to someone else entirely. The line clicked again. Well, looks like you're the owner, she said plainly. It was transferred 3 days ago, paid in full. Deed was signed, notarized, processed. All proper channels. You're good to go. Eli blinked. Sorry. Are you sure? There's no mistake? No mistake, she replied. You're the legal owner. House is yours. He didn't say anything. He couldn't. Sir? She asked, a little softer this time. Are you all right? He laughed, short and stunned. I don't think so, she chuckled. You'd be surprised how many people ask if it's real. I've seen stranger things. Eli hung up minutes later, still not fully breathing right. He stared down at the table, at the documents that weren't going anywhere. The house was real. And for the first time in years, so was the idea that maybe, just maybe, his life was about to change. The wind howled down Maple Lane as Eli stood in the driveway, one hand shielding his eyes, the other holding a rusted dolly loaded with 2 dented boxes and a taped-up laundry basket. His old car sat parked crooked in front of the house, the back seat packed with plastic bags and Maya's stuffed animals. A single bungee cord kept the trunk from swinging open. He looked up at the house. It wasn't big. A small, weathered 2-bedroom with peeling paint around the trim, and a creaky porch that sighed underfoot. But the grass was trimmed. The roof didn't leak. And when he stepped inside, the lights worked without hesitation. The heat clicked on like it knew they needed it. Warmth. Actual warmth. Maya ran from room to room, her sneakers squeaking on the hardwood. She was laughing, her voice echoing through the empty space like music. Dad, we have a hallway. Look, a real hallway. Eli followed her slowly, hands still clutching the keys like they might disappear. He stepped into the kitchen. The cabinets were empty, sure. The appliances were older than he was. But it smelled like fresh paint and wood polish, not mold and electricity fumes. No cockroach traps, no buzzing fluorescent lights. Just space. Clean, open space. He dropped the dolly by the door and sank down onto the floor, his back against the wall, head in his hands. Not crying, not quite, but somewhere close. The kind of emotion that simmers low in your chest, heavy and grateful and unreal. For the first time in a long, long while, there was no worry about whether the lights would be on tomorrow. No need to calculate if he had enough quarters to do laundry at the laundromat. No packing Maya's school lunch by flashlight. Maya came bounding in with her stuffed bunny in hand. Can we build a new fort here, Daddy? Eli looked around at the bare walls, the empty living room. Yeah, he said softly. I think this is the perfect place for one. And he meant it, because it wasn't just a house. It was a beginning. The sun had finally started to stick around longer, casting warm light over the front yard of the little house on Maple Lane. It wasn't much, just a patch of grass with more dandelions than flowers. But to Maya, it might as well have been a palace garden. Eli watched from the porch as she dragged out an old folding table, one leg slightly bent from years of use, and placed it near the sidewalk. She had scribbled the words, Lemonade 25C out on a sheet of construction paper, taping it to the front with pieces that kept peeling away in the breeze. Her hair was pulled back in a lopsided ponytail, and her cheeks were already pink from the excitement of the morning. He couldn't remember the last time she'd been this bright. Not pretend bright. Not the kind of polite smile she wore when she noticed he was tired, but real, toothy grinned, eyes squinting joy. She had picked out the lemons herself from the discount bin at the store. He let her do the math, watched her face light up when she realized they had just enough money left over for sugar and a bag of plastic cups. That night they made the lemonade together in the kitchen, squeezing, stirring, tasting, laughing, when Maya made a face and declared her first batch lemon soup. Now she waved at passing cars like she was mayor of the block. Eli leaned back on the porch step, sipping the very lemonade she had sold him for a nickel and a hug. The drink was too sweet, the lemon barely there, but he'd never tasted anything so perfect. He let the moment wash over him, soaking in the sound of her laughter as she tried to charm an old couple walking their dog into buying a cup. The neighbors were noticing them, waving, smiling. A man from 2 houses down even stopped to hand Maya a dollar bill and told her to keep the change. Later, as the sun dipped low and the sign flapped lazily in the breeze, Maya sat beside him on the porch, swinging her legs and counting her coins. "Do you think we can buy more lemons tomorrow?" she asked. Eli looked at her, heart aching in the best way. "Yeah, kiddo," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I think we absolutely can." The mailbox creaked when Eli opened it, the metal stiff from disuse. Bills, flyers, the usual stack of paper he didn't want and couldn't afford to deal with. He sifted through them mechanically, eyes scanning out of habit rather than interest, until he stopped. One envelope, no printed address, no logo, just his name written in neat looping cursive across the front. He stood frozen for a moment, heart suddenly heavier in his chest. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't junk. It was personal, real. He looked around, almost expecting someone to be watching from a car window or across the street, but the block was quiet. Only the hum of a lawnmower in the distance and the lazy bark of a dog behind a fence. Back inside, he sat at the kitchen table. The light above buzzed gently, flickering every now and then, like it hadn't quite settled in yet. Eli turned the envelope over and slid a finger under the seal. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, pale cream, the ink slightly smudged in places. "Dear Eli, I don't know how to start this except with thank you. You don't know me, not really, and yet you gave me something I hadn't had in years. A reason to believe there are still people in this world who see others, who care." Eli's eyes lingered on the next line. "That night at the gas station, I was planning to disappear. You stopped me with $1 and a sentence that has played in my mind every day since. Whatever you're going through, you matter. You have no idea how much those words saved me." His chest tightened. The kitchen fell silent around him, the world narrowing to the weight of the paper in his hands. "You didn't ask for anything. You didn't look at me like I was broken. You saw me. And because of that, I got help. I called someone. I talked. I cried. I lived. And I wanted you to know it mattered. You mattered. The house is yours because kindness like that deserves something back. I hope it gives you the peace you gave me in one small moment. Thank you for saving my life." A friend. Eli folded the letter slowly, hands trembling. He set it down like it was glass, then stared at it in silence, the reality sinking in like sunlight after a storm. He had saved someone, and somehow that person had saved him right back. Eli read the letter again the next morning, then a third time that night. He couldn't stop. The paper had softened from where his fingers kept folding it, unfolding it, trying to understand how something so small, so normal, could ripple into something so unfathomably huge. It was the second page that told the truth. "You should know what that day really was for me. I had given up, completely. That morning, I emptied my apartment, canceled my lease, deleted all my social media accounts. I had no one left, Eli, no one who knew the truth. I had planned everything, every detail. I was ready to vanish." He stopped reading there for a long while. The words blurred on the page, and his hands clenched tighter around the edges. His stomach turned, realizing just how close she had been to not being here at all. She'd looked like she was waiting for something, he remembered, sitting there by the vending machines like she wanted someone to see her, and yet everyone passed her by, everyone but him. He forced himself to read on. "I was sitting outside that gas station because I didn't want to do it inside my apartment. I didn't want someone to have to find me like that. I thought maybe if I felt the cold long enough, it would numb the fear. But then you came. You looked at me like I wasn't trash. You didn't ask questions or judge. You just saw me. And your voice. I remember it clearer than anything else that day. Whatever you're going through, you matter. That single sentence cracked something open in me. I hadn't heard anything like that in years. It made me pause, made me cry harder, made me go home. I didn't go through with it. Instead, I called a therapist. I told someone. I started unraveling the pain instead of burying it. Eli pressed the letter to his chest, heart pounding. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was never just about that. It was about something so much deeper. He hadn't just changed someone's life. He had saved it. And she'd never even told him her name. Eli sat on the front porch, the letter resting in his lap, the sky above painted in streaks of orange and fading blue. He could still hear Maya laughing through the open window, humming some made-up tune as she played with her markers on the living room floor. The world felt still, almost too still, like the air was holding its breath. He didn't hear the car pull up until it stopped at the curb. It was sleek, black, and quiet, the kind of vehicle that didn't belong on this sleepy street. The driver's door opened slowly. A woman stepped out. She wore a long beige coat, her hair tied back neatly. No makeup, but not a single thing about her looked careless. Her eyes scanned the street before settling on the house. On him. Eli stood, unsure of whether to wave or back into the doorway. Something in his gut twisted when she began walking toward him. She stopped at the bottom of the steps. Eli Turner? He nodded, cautious. Yeah? She took a breath, as if steadying herself. I'm Alina West. He blinked. The name landed with a strange weight, familiar, heavy. And then, like a slow trickle of memory, he placed it. Alina West. The Alina West. Founder of the Solace Foundation. The woman who'd been on talk shows, magazine covers, charity galas. The same woman who disappeared from the public eye a year ago after a headline, Tragedy Strikes Philanthropist, Alina West's brother, dies in overdose. Eli's mind reeled. He remembered that story. Everyone did. It was everywhere for weeks. And then she vanished. Now she stood on his porch. I wanted to thank you in person, she said, her voice quieter now, for what you did that night. He looked at her, truly looked, and it hit him. The woman at the gas station, the shoes that didn't match, the silence. The grief she carried in her eyes, it had been this woman all along. I didn't know, he said, still stunned. I didn't want anyone to, she replied. I needed to be no one, to break down without a camera in my face. She paused, glancing toward the house, toward the laughter echoing from inside. You didn't just stop me from making a mistake. You reminded me who I used to be. Eli didn't know what to say. He only knew one thing now for certain. The woman he'd given his last dollar to wasn't just someone broken by life. She was someone rebuilding it, starting with him. Eli followed her down the hallway of the building like a man stepping into another world. The offices were quiet but filled with movement. Volunteers hustling with clipboards, a woman guiding someone gently through an intake form, a teenager holding a paper cup of cocoa with trembling hands. The walls were soft shades of green and blue, every inch of the place designed to feel nothing like a hospital and even less like a shelter. It felt calm, safe. Alina walked beside him, hands clasped in front of her. She wasn't performing or presenting like someone used to speaking on stages. She wasn't Alina West, public figure. She was just present, focused. This place didn't exist 2 years ago, she said quietly. I built it after my brother passed. I thought money would be enough to save him, but it wasn't. By the time I realized what he needed, he was already gone. She paused at a doorway, gesturing toward a room where 2 young women were sitting with a counselor deep in conversation. One of them had a sleeve pulled down to hide her wrist. Eli recognized the way she hunched her shoulders inward like armor. I spent so long talking about hope on stages, I forgot how to live it in the quiet, Alina said. It took losing everything. And then that night at the gas station, to understand what real saving looks like. Eli turned toward her. I didn't do anything special, he said, barely above a whisper. It was just $1. Alina looked at him like she was seeing more than he realized. "No," she said. "It was dignity. You gave me something without asking for anything back. And that reminded me what all of this is supposed to be about." They continued down the hallway, past private therapy rooms, emergency beds, a small community kitchen. Eli saw people who were where he had once been, shaky, hollow-eyed, on the edge of giving up. And they were being held up by something simple, compassion, someone who believed they were still worth helping. "This is the Solace Foundation," Alina said, "but it really started with you." Eli stood in silence, overwhelmed. He had been scraping by for so long he forgot what it felt like to stand on solid ground. And now, here he was, surrounded by walls he unknowingly helped build. Not because he was wealthy, not because he was powerful, but because he had once looked at a stranger and said, "You matter." The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, tucked among a stack of junk mail and pre-approved credit offers. Eli almost tossed it. The weight of it was different, though. Thicker paper, his name written in the same looping cursive as the letter that had changed everything. Inside was a single sheet, crisp and elegant, embossed at the top, the Solace Foundation, Annual Gala. Below that, in black ink, was a handwritten message. Eli. "We'd be honored if you would speak at this year's event. Your story changed more than just my life. It continues to ripple outward. Let others hear it too." Alina Eli sat at the kitchen table, rereading the invitation with disbelief tightening around his chest. Him? Speak? In front of hundreds of people? He wasn't anyone. Just a father who once gave a stranger his last dollar outside a gas station. That night, after putting Maya to bed, he sat outside on the porch, the invitation resting in his lap, the cool night air wrapping around him like a quiet question. What would he even say? He wasn't eloquent. He didn't have the right words or a polished story. He hadn't saved a life on purpose. He was just trying to survive one more day. But maybe, just maybe, that was the point. The next day he called the number written in the corner of the card. Alina answered herself. "You really want me to speak?" he asked, still unsure. There was no hesitation. "Absolutely. I'm not a public speaker. I fix things when they're broken, but talking about myself, I've never—" "You don't have to be polished, Eli," she said softly. "Just be honest. That's what saved me." He stared at the floor, one hand gripping the phone, the other resting on the scarred edge of the kitchen table. He thought of Maya, of the camping nights in a cold apartment, of a life where kindness felt like the only currency he had left. And for the first time, he thought maybe his story could be worth something more than just memory. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll do it." And in the silence that followed, he realized something. He wasn't just someone who had made it through. He was someone others needed to hear. The night before the gala, Eli sat on the edge of his bed, hands gripping the lapels of the second-hand blazer Alina had insisted on having tailored for him. It fit well, too well, like it belonged to someone else. The mirror across the room didn't show a hero. It showed a man with deep lines under his eyes and calluses that never fully went away, even when the work stopped. A man who still double-checked every light switch, unsure if the power would really stay on this time. A man who sometimes woke up in a cold sweat, expecting to find the eviction notice back on the door. Maya was asleep down the hall. She'd helped him rehearse his speech earlier, standing on top of a milk crate and reading from her dad's scribbled notes like a tiny stage manager. She'd said he sounded important. He had laughed then, but now it just echoed in his chest, hollow and distant. He wasn't important. He hadn't cured anything. He hadn't pulled anyone from a burning building or invented a way to fix the world. He'd handed a stranger a crumpled dollar because it was all he had. And somehow that had unraveled into a story that didn't feel like his anymore. He pulled out the invitation again. The same heavy card stock, the same elegant font, his name printed just below the words, "Guest Speaker." His hand hovered over his phone. He could call. Say he changed his mind. Say he wasn't ready. They'd understand, wouldn't they? His thumb moved toward the screen, but then a sound from the hallway stopped him, bare feet padding on wood. Maya appeared in the doorway, eyes heavy with sleep, her favorite stuffed bunny clutched in one hand. "Daddy?" she mumbled. "You okay?" He looked at her, this small miracle, who never knew how close they came to losing everything. She'd never known he sometimes went without dinner. She never saw the nights he cried alone in the car. All she ever saw was a man trying his best. He swallowed the lump in his throat and forced a smile. Just thinking. She climbed onto his lap, curling into him. "You're going to be great," she whispered. "You always are." And just like that, the doubt didn't disappear. But it loosened, because maybe he wasn't a hero. But to her, he was enough. Eli was standing in the kitchen, nervously flipping through his note cards for the 10th time, when Maya appeared behind him, silent like a little shadow. She tugged gently on his sleeve, something clutched in her small hands. "I made you something," she said, holding out a folded sheet of paper like it was a sacred gift. Eli set the cards down and knelt beside her, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "What is it, sweetheart?" She bit her lip, shy now that the moment had come. "It's for tomorrow, when you do the talking thing." He opened the paper slowly. There, in crayon and crooked lines, was a picture of him, big, bold, towering. His hair stuck up a little, his arms outstretched, and a red cape flapping behind him. In one hand he held a bag of groceries. In the other, a smaller figure, clearly Maya, smiling up at him, across the top in purple letters that leaned into each other. "My Dad, the Superhero." Eli stared at it for a long time, something thick rising in his throat. He blinked fast and cleared his voice, but the words didn't come. The drawing wasn't perfect. His ears were lopsided and his shoes didn't match, but none of that mattered, because it was how she saw him. Not as someone who had barely scraped by, not as someone who had failed 1,000 times before getting anything right, but as someone who had tried, who had shown up, who had loved her through every broken moment. "You gave me a cape," he finally said, voice quiet. Maya nodded seriously. "Because you always fix things, like superheroes do, even when it's hard." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, breathing in the smell of her hair, shampoo and crayons, and the kind of love that didn't need explaining. "You're my superhero," she whispered, against his shirt. And in that moment, Eli didn't feel like an imposter. He didn't feel like a man pretending to be brave. He felt like exactly who she believed he was. And that was more powerful than anything he'd ever known. The ballroom shimmered under the soft glow of 100 chandeliers, the kind of place Eli had only seen in movies or through the smudged glass of a storefront TV. Tables dressed in white linen stretched across the floor, filled with polished people in tailored suits and evening gowns. Waiters moved like shadows, silent and efficient, while the hum of soft music floated in the background. Eli stood just off stage, his palms slick against the note cards he clutched, though he hadn't looked at them in nearly 20 minutes. His tie felt too tight. His shoes, borrowed, pinched at the toes. The hum of conversation behind the velvet curtain made his chest ache with nerves. From the wings, Alina gave him a quiet nod, her expression steady but warm. He didn't know how she always looked so composed. Eli felt like a storm was trapped in his ribcage. The MC finished his introduction. "And now, it's my honor to welcome a man whose small act of kindness changed more lives than he ever could have imagined. Please welcome Eli Turner." Applause erupted, polite but genuine. He stepped forward, nearly tripping over the edge of the carpeted step. The stage lights were blinding. The room looked like a blur of shadows and candlelight, but he could feel their eyes. All of them. He reached the podium and took a breath. For a moment he said nothing. Then, his voice quiet but steady. "I'm not used to rooms like this." A ripple of laughter softened the tension in his shoulders. "I'm just a dad," he said, eyes scanning the crowd. "A tired one most days. A man who once had to choose between gas for the car and milk for his daughter." The room went still. I never thought $1 could change anything, but that's all I had the night I saw a woman crying outside a gas station. I didn't know her name. I didn't ask. I just handed her what I had and told her she mattered. He paused, swallowed. Turns out that one moment mattered more than I'll ever understand. He didn't cry, but his voice cracked, and in that crack, something real bloomed: connection, empathy, truth. By the time he finished, the room was silent, not from discomfort, from reverence. Because in that moment, Eli Turner wasn't just a tired father, he was a reminder that the smallest act can echo louder than we ever imagine. Eli stepped down from the podium, his heart thudding so loudly it nearly drowned out the applause that erupted behind him. But it wasn't the kind of clapping that felt routine or polite. It was raw, genuine, the kind of sound that held weight. And yet, beneath it all, there was something else. Silence. The kind that settled over a room when people weren't sure whether to cheer or cry. The kind that lingered in the space after something true had been said. Eli looked around as he walked back toward his seat, eyes catching glimpses of faces in the crowd. A woman at table 4 pressing a tissue to her cheek. A man with silver hair blinking rapidly, jaw clenched like he was trying not to let the emotion show. A young couple holding hands a little tighter than before. Strangers who didn't know him, but who had felt something. Not because he was special, but because he had reminded them what it meant to simply care. As he reached the edge of the ballroom, Alina was there. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her arms opened, and he stepped into them without hesitation. It wasn't a polite, camera-ready embrace. It was tight, real. The kind of hug that says, "I understand you in ways no one else can. You did more than you'll ever know," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave people something real tonight." Eli pulled back slightly, his voice low. "I was just telling the truth." "Exactly," she said, tears shimmering in her eyes. "And that's why it mattered." They stood there for a moment longer, surrounded by the soft murmur of the crowd beginning to stir again. People rising from their chairs, wiping eyes, hugging loved ones, clapping each other on the back like something sacred had just passed through the room. It wasn't a night about fanfare or charity galas anymore, not really. It was about a father who gave his last $1 to a stranger and said, "You matter." And tonight, in front of a room full of people, that simple truth had echoed louder than any donation or speech ever could. The gala was winding down, but Eli still felt like the floor might give out beneath him. Not from nerves anymore, something else. A strange mix of disbelief and gravity, like the night had cracked something open inside him, and now the world was different. He stood near the back of the ballroom, a cup of water in his hand, untouched. His speech still echoed faintly in the corners of the room, even though the microphone had long gone silent. People passed by, offering nods, handshakes, a few hugs. A woman with tear-streaked makeup clasped both of his hands and said, "I haven't talked to my dad in 7 years, until I heard you speak. I just texted him." Eli didn't know what to say. He just nodded and squeezed her hand gently. Then came the man in the dark gray suit, older, with kind eyes and the posture of someone who didn't need to command attention to earn it. He approached quietly, without pretense, and extended a hand. "Eli Turner?" Eli shook it, cautious but respectful. "Yes, sir." "I'm Henry Lawson, Director of Community Partnerships for Second Horizon Foundation." The name rang a distant bell. One of those major nonprofits that actually made a difference. Food drives, housing programs, mental health resources. Eli had once stood in line for one of their grocery distributions, back when he'd been counting coins for bread. "I wanted to thank you for what you said tonight," Henry continued. "You didn't just speak from the heart. You showed people what it means to be human. That's rare." Eli shifted, unsure where this was going. "We're expanding a new community outreach initiative," Henry said. "One that's not run from boardrooms, but from the streets. Real people, real voices. We need someone like you." Eli blinked. "Me?" Henry smiled. "Yes, full-time. Full benefits, flexible schedule, and most importantly, You wouldn't just be working a job, you'd be building bridges for people who feel forgotten. You've lived that. They'll trust you. Eli swallowed hard. His mind reeled. This wasn't charity. It wasn't a handout. It was a future. He didn't say yes right away. He just nodded slowly, eyes burning. But in his chest, something whispered, "This is the beginning of everything you thought you'd never have." Eli didn't need a stage to change lives. That much he knew now. A month had passed since the gala, but the effects lingered in ways he hadn't expected. Not in the form of newspaper headlines or viral clips, though someone had uploaded his speech and it had quietly made its way around the internet, but in the everyday. He started showing up early at the Foundation's Outreach Center, before the coffee brewed, before the halls filled with caseworkers and social workers and clients. He wasn't there to lead, at least not officially. He was just there, stocking shelves, sweeping floors, sitting with people no one else had time for. He had a way of listening without judgment, without leaning in too close or nodding just to fill the silence. He let people talk, or not. He offered a cup of coffee and sometimes his own coat, and always, he made sure they left with something, hope, a number, a name, a reason to come back tomorrow. It started small. A man on the edge of eviction who left the center with a signed rental assistance form and a look of disbelief in his eyes, a teenage girl with bruised wrists who finally agreed to stay the night in the shelter. After Eli told her, she reminded him of his daughter, tough, quiet, and worth more than anyone ever told her. Then came the ripple. A woman Eli had once helped called him a week later. She had taken in her cousin's baby after hearing his story, said she'd remembered his words. "We're all just one kind word away from breaking or surviving." Then a mechanic down the street who'd once fixed Eli's busted radiator for half price started offering free inspections on weekends. People noticed. Not because Eli made them, but because he reminded them how easy it was to care, how powerful it could be to stop, to listen, to give someone 5 minutes, and a little dignity. He hadn't meant to start a movement, but maybe kindness, the real kind, was never meant to be loud. Maybe it was meant to spread like this, quiet, steady, unstoppable. The knock came just as Eli was drying dishes, the towel slung over his shoulder, and the smell of warm sugar still lingering in the air. He didn't expect anyone. Visitors were rare. Most people called first. When he opened the door, Alina stood there, smiling gently, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers in one hand, a bottle of sparkling apple cider in the other. "I thought I'd finally come see it," she said. Eli blinked and then stepped aside, the screen door creaking on its hinges. "You didn't have to bring anything." "I didn't," she replied, stepping inside, "but it felt like the kind of day you should toast to something." The house had changed since that first day. A splash of soft paint on the walls, a few framed drawings from Maya hung like museum pieces, and the scent of vanilla hanging in the air from a batch of cookies cooling on the counter. "Maya," Eli called, "we've got company." Footsteps thundered down the hall before Maya appeared, her hair in a messy braid, her hands still dusted with flour. "You're her," she said, wide-eyed. Alina laughed. "I think that's me." Maya grinned, took her hand without hesitation, and led her straight to the kitchen. "I made cookies. Daddy helped with the oven part, but I did the rest." Alina knelt beside her, accepting a cookie with both hands. "These might be the most important cookies I've ever eaten." They sat at the table, sunlight streaming through the window. Alina's blazer hung over the back of the chair, her sleeves rolled up, her laughter mixing easily with Maya's chatter. Eli leaned back, watching them. Something about the scene, the domestic simplicity of it, hit harder than anything else that had happened this year. Not speeches, not stages, not contracts or job offers or documents signed in ink. This, a table shared, a laugh exchanged, a connection deeper than words. Alina looked around the kitchen, then at Eli. "It feels like a home." He nodded. "It is." They clinked their cider glasses together like it meant something sacred. And maybe in a way it did, because some homes aren't built with nails and wood. They're built with grace. And second chances. The mornings looked different now. Eli still woke up early, before the sun cracked over the rooftops, before Maya stirred in her bed down the hall. But there was no heaviness anymore, no immediate panic about bills or food or whether the heat would stay on. The air in the house felt settled, like it belonged to a life that finally made room for breathing. He sipped his coffee at the kitchen table, flipping through a notebook filled with names, notes, and follow-up calls. A binder of outreach cases sat beside it, thick with handwritten updates. Every line told a story, some hard, some hopeful, but each of them mattered. He'd been volunteering full-time with Alina's foundation for 3 months now. At first, it had been just a couple hours a week, then a few days. Then he found himself there more often than not, greeting new faces, checking up on old ones, offering rides, hot meals, or just silence when words felt like too much. People trusted him, not because he had degrees or titles, but because when he said, "I've been there," they believed him, because he had been there. One afternoon he sat across from a man not much older than himself, eyes sunken, hands shaking around a paper cup. The man kept saying, "I'm nothing, I'm just tired, man. So tired." Eli reached into his wallet and pulled out $1, folded, soft, worn. "I gave my last one of these to someone once," he said. "Didn't think it mattered, but it did." The man stared at it, confused. "Keep it," Eli said. "It's not for spending, just for remembering that even when you have nothing, you still have something to give." Later that week, the man came back, sober, shaved, holding the $1 like a lifeline. Eli wasn't just getting by anymore. He wasn't patching together scraps of hope to survive the week. He was building something, helping others build something too, and every time he locked up the center at night, walked back to his car with tired feet and a full heart, he knew this was more than purpose. This was healing, in motion, in full circle. Sometimes the biggest miracles begin with the smallest moments. A man with nothing left in his wallet but a single crumpled $1. A woman on the edge, quietly unraveling beneath the weight of grief. 2 strangers at a gas station, one offering, the other barely holding on. And from that moment, everything changed. Eli Turner didn't set out to be a hero. He wasn't trying to be remembered or honored. He was just a father, tired and stretched thin, doing what little he could with what little he had. $1 and a sentence. That's all he offered. Whatever you're going through, you matter. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't polished. It was real. And that reality cracked open the silence in someone who had nearly let go. From that small crack, light poured in. That woman, Alina West, took that moment and chose to live. And in doing so, she lit a path not just for herself, but for countless others. A house was given, a life was rebuilt, a story was shared, and slowly, through conversations, through connections, through kindness, Eli became something he never expected. A symbol. A seed of what's possible when we stop long enough to see each other. People often ask how to change the world. They think it takes power or money or titles. But sometimes it takes none of those things. Sometimes all it takes is a man who chooses not to walk past the pain of another human being. Sometimes it's a little girl who believes her dad is a superhero, because even when they had nothing, he made her feel safe. Sometimes it's a community built on second chances, where dignity is handed out with coffee and blankets, and stories are healed one conversation at a time. $1, one kind word. That's all it took to change everything. So the next time you think you have nothing to offer, remember this story. Remember Eli. Remember that even the smallest kindness can echo further than you'll ever know, because someone somewhere is waiting for a reason to stay, and you might just be it.